typical makeup based on what we've seen for soils underneath the field. We'll pull up the soils, as Dave mentioned, of the existing field. We'll reuse those to improve the lower natural grass field. We'll do some grading of the subgrade, place a geotextile fabric, and then from there we're sort of building up the field. We've got our drainage stone and flat drains to move water to the perimeters, and then above that drainage stone is a pad. This pad does two things. It improves drainage both vertically and horizontally, and it provides a level of safety over 16 years, guaranteeing impact, basically, impact with the surface. So GMAX and head impact criteria, which we will also test for an 8-year period, sort of guaranteeing you a level of safety for your student athletes. Above that pad then is what you would typically see, a synthetic turf carpet, 2 inches tall. This specific carpet that we're looking at proposing is a slip film monofilament blend. So it's a blend of a very durable fiber as well as monofilament, which gives some performance characteristics in terms of ball roll, play for soccer, play for lacrosse, play for field hockey. Within that system then are the pieces which were mentioned earlier in terms of what we're looking at for infill. So currently this is the base bit infill, which is a coated sand. This product requires the pad in order to keep that impact attenuation testing in a safe range, but also gives a very firm, fast play / feel. It has some unique performance characteristics. And then the alternate, which is new, is the product is called Brockville. It is a product made from loblolly pine, kiln dried, and then mixed with a ratio of sand. It's going to feel very similar to the coated sand in terms of performance. Unfortunately, there's no fields here to go see or anywhere in the country. This product will be coming out this year, so should you choose to go with something like this, there may be some cost benefits, but you're also a little bit of a pioneer in terms of its use. It does carry the same warranty, but just something to think about. All organic the system can all be recycled at this point, which is one of the nice pieces of both of these infills in terms of their use and the carpet we're choosing. So, questions regarding the system? We're rebuilding all the jumping areas. I think you mentioned we're rebuilding all the jumping areas, storage.
I failed to mention that now.
So we've got 6 storage
You
components.
could bring this to them. They're the ones voting.
Three here along the bleachers and the newly located straightaway. The idea is that you can use a storage unit for different sports. It's convenient to have them along the straightaways for hurdles, next to jumping areas for pads, that sort of thing. We are moving this set of storage units down to the lower field for storage of hammer, discus, some of the throwing things, and then any practice equipment for the different teams that would be required down at that lower area. So 6 up top, 3 here, and then there'll be 3 down at that lower field.
And then for the equipment storage for, I don't know the name of the equipment, the maintenance equipment for the turf, which one would that, where's that go?
I think it can go in any of those.
I just want to make sure they're big. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know that we won't probably designate any.
Okay, but those
Specific.
are big enough for that as well,
They're
not
10,
just.
they're 10 by 15 each with a roll-up door,
Yeah.
and we can go with a variety of colors to sort of fit the branding of North Kingstown.
Okay.
G&G.
I just wanted to make sure that that
Yep.
wasn't just, that it included the equipment storage. Okay, great.
No, you gotta, we talked about in the subcommittee
Yeah.
about having that equipment, it's vital for the maintenance of the field and having that, inside some kind of a structure, so
Right.
not exposed to the elements and.
We will have a training session with that equipment as part of the specifications. I mentioned we include testing over the 8 years. We do also include twice annual maintenance by a professional. So they come in, they're gonna test your infill depths, they're gonna test the safety, they're also gonna groom the field and level out any infill, pick up any foreign objects, that sort of thing. Just to ensure its safety and longevity.
Any questions, gentlemen?
Yeah, I just have two quick things. Justin, the brick fill has the same shelf life as the sand fill?
The Brockville?
Yeah.
This actually, so this carries an 8-year warranty. I believe that's going, again, it's not in yet, but I believe this is gonna carry a 10-year warranty. We've seen this go in multiple cycles now, so it certainly can last the length of the warranty of the pad, which is 16.
16. All right. And just quickly, David, is there a way to identify contractors that have had a past or done past projects dealing with that marshland and that wet area off to the side?
Well, we'll make sure we spit this out to qualified contractors. Which marshland are you?
I mean, when you get to that side and then out, it's a wetland area, and I know that
Oh, yeah.
that will, adjust the water tables, and sometimes if they dig too far down, they'll get a
Yeah.
little surprise. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have, we're gonna be doing some test pits out here just to confirm the soil characteristics. We've done some in the past, and there's been some information available for when the school was built a number of years ago. We're gonna start our permitting process with DEM. They'll be very interested in where the water table sits, the soil composition, how close we are to those wetlands. And then we'll have provisions in the contract for dewatering, should they need to do it, if they have to put a pipe in and there's water in there. DEM's very descriptive in how they want that managed. They want to put dewatering discharges to a sedimentation basin that's going to take the
Right.
sediment out before it overflows. So we will be putting that into the contract.
so it doesn't seem like a huge concern for the football field, but I mean, that backfield gets really close to where
Yeah,
all that stuff starts coming up.
absolutely. Yeah, this area down here, we're doing some regrading. One of the good things in that field, we feel we're gonna have a surplus of material, because we're gonna pull out so much of that, the cross-section of that, in that existing field. And then we're gonna put a lot of that should be a very good sandy material. That's what that turf is comprised of. So we're gonna be raising the grades here, which will give us a little bit more separation from the water table. And we'll be building things up more than we will be cutting down. So, things like groundwater weeping and stuff like that, were less of a concern when you're putting that fill on there. But certainly, yeah, those are things to take into account.
Any other questions?
Can we have North Kingstown spelled?
I checked.
There is a W.
It is the running joke,
I've gotten
but you'll
several
hear it
emails
again.
on that issue once it passed, by the way.
All right, if there aren't any other questions, and we, strictly speaking, didn't need to approve this item, but we did want to bring it, to the full committee, have everybody sort of take a look at it. It's, as I mentioned when we started this agenda item, this is simply to begin the request for proposal process. From here, we will actually have, ultimately bids come back where the actual decisions will be made as to awarding the bids. And then we will have to finalize the decisions on, items like the Brockville, for example. And that's gonna have to be, that in particular is kind of one of the big discussions to have. The other things are a little more straightforward, so
I
we'll have to
spilled a
see.
little on myself. You're gonna bill us for that, aren't you?
So you can keep that.
It's actually very expensive.
That's the less expensive
Yeah,
product, but
good
it has
you
some
spelled that
questions, so
one.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah. So, all right, then, if there is not any further discussion, I would ask for an approval of item D, or motion to approve item D3.
Motion to approve item D3?
And a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Oh, wait, no,
Yes.
I just wanna thank, well, first of all, I think the committee for thinking about this in advance, and then the administration, you know, we started this probably a year ago, you know, leaning forward, and then the subsequent engagement with PAR and the other, you know, landscape architects and other things to, you know, to get us a point now where fortunately we got the approval, but now we're ready to hit the ground running instead of having to wait
Starting
this
you
whole
now.
process here to, you know, to really allow us to have this, knock on wood, ready for next fall. So, you know, appreciate the proactive stance, you know, the administration took in getting this going.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen, for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you very much.
And off
Put
you
that up in the
go.
high school.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You can't show us that one, though. All right, so next item on the agenda is if I could have a motion to seal the executive session minutes of this evening, November 13th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Tony Jones, second, Mr. Robert Jones. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And I can disclose that no votes were taken at the executive session this evening. We have our consent agenda. Are there any items anyone would like to exempt? I need to exempt items E3 and E4. Any others? Hearing none, if I could have a motion to pass the non-exempted executive session, sorry, the non-exempted consent agenda items, saying the wrong words.
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Robert Jones. Do I have a second? Second, Mr. Tony Jones. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. With respect to item E3, I'm going to make a motion to approve item E3 with the addition of Michael Minor, the North Kingstown High School assistant ice hockey coach, funding from non-general funds. It's just an additional coach name. So if I could have, I made the motion, if I could have a second.
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Robert Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And with respect to item E4, we didn't have a final name at the time the agenda packets went out, so the name of the Wickford Middle School basketball coach is going to would be Kendrick Hayes, with a stipend of $2,500. So I'll make a motion to approve item E4 with that name and amount.
Second.
A second from Mr. Tony Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we have unfinished business, update on the 2017-18 audit. Mrs. King.
Yes, I just wanted to update the school committee that about 2 weeks ago, the audit, FY18 audit for the school department portion was largely completed. There'll still be some work left to do on federal grants, but we're gonna need some information from the town before the auditors can do that. So what they do is now they'll move on over to the town side and do what they need to do over there. But we are largely done. There were no issues that were reported to me. I don't expect there to be any issues. So hopefully that report will be on time this year.
Thank you. And next is with respect to the 2018-19 school budget and the fiscal year 19 meritorious budget award submittal.
I just wanted to remind you all that on our website, under administration, departments, business office, and then annual budget, we have a very, very large budget document that we submit to the Association of School Business Officials International, and it's called the Meritorious Budget Award, and we submit for that award. We, the North Kingstown School Department is the only district in Rhode Island that has won that award 3 years in a row. Basically, other districts don't apply because there's a lot of information that's required in that package. And I refer you to it, especially new people on the committee, because it's nearly 500 pages long, but it has an unbelievable amount of history and detail regarding just every aspect of the school department, and there's a lot of town data in there as well. There's a very lengthy checklist that you have to follow by ASBO and all of the information that you need to include in it. And I really need to give credit to our controller, Steve Janelle, he was the one who came to me 3 years ago or so and said that he wanted to start applying for this award. I thought he was crazy, but certainly I supported him in doing that, and he's done a great job. The first year clearly was the toughest year putting that together, but every year I've seen that he's made improvements to it, and we've won since the first year that we submitted. And it's a really it's a big honor, because it really is a big display of our transparency and our financial progress, and how important it is to us in North Kingstown School Department that we are transparent and that our financial records are flawless. So I refer you to that document, especially when we're moving forward into the future budget years, because it'll give you a lot of history and a lot of stuff.
Thank you.
You said that's 500 pages?
Nearly.
Is there an audiobook available?
No cliff notes yet. We're coming up with that next year.
But as Mrs. King said, though certainly we don't expect anyone to read necessarily all 500 pages, because it's such a wealth of information, it's almost like, just a budgetary fact handbook, as to the district and the town as well. So you can find a tremendous amount of, information on any number of, details you might want to know about an individual school or the budget as a whole, and populations and things like that. So it's an excellent resource. So it comes in very handy, in addition to, we've been lucky enough to, and it's not from luck, but successful enough in actually, being recognized for the detail there. And thank you and your staff. Next, we have the 2019-2020 school budget calendar time.
It is. So I just want to update everybody on what the budget calendar is looking like for FY20. So the first step in that is Monday, December 17th, we have a joint meeting with the town council. You're not going to have any excruciating details at that budget meeting, but Dr. Ajay puts together kind of an outlook for FY20, some initiatives for FY20, and some of the obstacles that we face, or some of the bigger issues that the school department needs to deal with. Especially in this year, that will be important because we do have 3 new town council members, although Mr. Mancini has been involved on the periphery for the school department. There still are 3 new members of the town council, so that's going to be a very important meeting for us to attend. So that's kind of the kickoff for the FY20 budget. Then the first draft of the school department budget, I strive to get to you by the first meeting in January, and that's January 15th. And we're going to try to get it to you a few days early if possible. Then we have a few more meetings after that in which we discuss the budget. We'll have that on the agenda every one of those meetings to discuss. You can certainly reach out to Dr. Ajay and I individually. The important date for the budget will be February 19th. So that's our second meeting in February. And the budget needs to be approved that night unless we call another meeting within that week, because we have to have that budget by the budget calendar to the town manager by Monday, February 25th. So if there are any changes to the budget, I usually need to take the next couple of days to do that. But certainly if we have a problem, if we decide we need to schedule another meeting, we can do that, but that budget needs to be to the town manager by February 25th. From there, what usually happens is in about mid-March or so, and I'm not sure that they're going to do the same thing this year, but in mid-March, Dr. Ajay and I are called to a meeting. When I first started here, we used to go during the day and spend time with the town council, and they would ask us questions about our budget. The last couple of years, we've been doing it at night. They also discuss capital budget at that time. So we expect that probably it'll be the same format. We'll go at night, we'll be asked questions about our budget in March. And then we don't hear from the town council on what our percentage increase is or what our number is until early May. It's usually around May 5th or May 6th when we find out. So that gives us a couple of meetings to make any adjustments that we need to make from that point. So it's a pretty lengthy timeline. We start very early here. We have already had just about all of our meetings with our principals and department heads. We have a few more that we're wrapping up. But the early start to the budget makes things a little more difficult when you're projecting things out also. So one of the big things we always very unsure of is healthcare. The only thing we can usually budget for healthcare is what the trends nationwide are. We're unable to have any real data for our own population, so usually we find out maybe in March or April what that real number is. We've been lucky the past few years, the real number has been favorable to us. But it is a very early timeline, but that's exactly what we're looking at. So February 19th is the day to remember for approval.
And it happens faster than you think. There aren't that many meetings, though it seems like a long way. All right, thank you very much, Mr.
Yeah,
Jones.
I think we should just remember that we're in year 9 of the funding formula.
This is year 8.
Right, so year 9, of which the last 2 years, North Kingstown is, I guess for lack of a better word, a funding formula loser, despite stable enrollment and increasing FRL. The property valuations and income data from 3 years ago magically make their way to, in the formula, determine that we should take another 600 plus thousand cut, which is 1.5%, roughly 1% of the levy. I know we have at least one new General Assembly member, but I would say when you're thinking about ways of keeping your tax bill stable, that's the first thing you should start with, is asking, your representatives and senators why a system exists that really punishes schools for basically data that is 3 and 4 years old, and uses a somewhat flawed method for calculating local communities' ability to pay. So just remember, as we start this budget year, regardless of other changes, we are starting $600,000 plus in the hole, not to mention some other small changes that seem to be occurring which add more expenses to the district. Seems new mandates and other items. So again, from an advocate perspective, I have asked, I think others have, I know through the superintendent, through their associations, but I would say if you take the time to come to these meetings or listen, you should take the time to ask our town council and our local General Assembly members that maybe this is an item that needs to be revisited. There was a proposal last year to at least stabilize local aid to education, especially based on your enrollments. I think that's something I hope the General Assembly takes up again.
Shorter answer is we get less money from the state every year. And we better find it somewhere.
Well, again, I think you look around and there's lots of discussions about economic development in the town and stuff, but I would venture to guess that most people in North Kingstown don't feel that over the last few years our ability to contribute our state's share has significantly improved to the point where we should take what's essentially almost a 20% cut from 3 years ago in local aid to education funding. We're almost down to a state share level that's equivalent with East Greenwich. So.
Their state share actually went up.
And that's a
yeah.
direct shift of that burden to the property tax
Of the local
of the
taxpayers.
taxpayers.
I think that's an important issue undercutting this whole budget discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. So next we have CIP existing bond and future bond. The biggest new news, obviously, the November 2018 bond referendum, which passed with excellent numbers. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the meeting.
There's a whole list of bond projects that was put out on the webpage and sent to all parents in the district on one of my emails when we were sending out information about the bond. So if anyone is interested in learning more about, what other projects, there are projects at every school. Some of the larger projects involved include air conditioning at the high school, windows, all new windows at Davisville Middle School, a lot of flooring projects around the district, particularly at some of our elementary schools. And all those combined come, our estimate is around $13.5 million worth of work. And we project that most, if not all of that, will be taken care of in the next 2 years. So as you can see, tonight we started right in on the track and field, but there will be other nights that are coming over the next year or so, where we will be talking about, RFPs for windows at Davisville Middle and air conditioning projects and all that. And they're all kind of on their own timeline. A lot of them involve months and months of preparation, just to be ready for a contractor to hit that zone, which for us is the summer. A lot of these things we just cannot do while kids are in school. So we estimate most of this work to be done over the next 2 summers. And I hope people are not feeling like, well, it's already a week after the bond was approved, how come the air conditioning's not in the high school yet? It doesn't quite work that way. But we're on it, and these things will be rolled out over the next couple of years.
Thank you.
Probably more like 3, because the projects are pretty big. And to follow up on that, though, we have several approval points. So we do need to go back to RIDE. So although these are in our 5-year asset protection plan, when the projects get going for construction documents and schematics, that all still has to go through RIDE to be approved. We need to bid everything out. We need to get to the school committee. So it is a lengthy process on the larger projects. So we're looking at what exactly we think we can get done in the coming summer besides the athletic complex, because we're starting late to get things planned, because we didn't know that the bond was going to pass. So there'll be some limited things done, but the summer after next will be a really big summer. We'll be pushing to get as much as we possibly can done in that time frame.
Thank you. So next we have school committee approval of the fiscal year 2020 capital improvement program. It's in your packets. Any questions on the details that was in there?
So this is put together for you in 4 sections. So there's a summary page and then 4 distinct sections after that. So the first part is the bond referendum, $13.5 million, the list of projects that are part of that. The second part is capital reserve, which really basically is the school department surplus if we have one. The reason why that spreadsheet is in here is because RIDE recommends that when you complete your 5-year asset protection plan, you put some projects in there that could possibly be funded in other ways besides bonding. Because if that bond that we just had in November had failed, we would have had to resubmit an entire 5-year asset protection plan. So that's kind of insulated us so that we could at least maybe limp along and do some projects if that bond had passed. If it had failed, thank goodness it didn't. But there are some additional items that possibly we can get done if we're lucky enough to have any surplus. So that line is pretty tentative. You understand that we are not guaranteed a surplus. The third line is the town council capital funding. Consistently over the last several years, we have asked for items that are not bondable items, if you will. Buses, playground equipment, technology, security upgrades. And this year there's an addition of a reserve for the athletic complex. But we say they're not bondable items because you don't want to bond a piece of maintenance equipment for 20 years, although we keep our equipment a long time. Same thing with, technology is not something you're going to put into a bond that you pay off over 20 years when technology only lasts for a few years, but they're big dollar expenses, so that's why we still consider them capital. They are big items. And then the fourth distinct section, again, was something that was submitted to RIDE, and those are just future capital projects. And all of that, all of these items except for the capital funding to the town council request came out of the 5-year asset protection plan. That plan has approximately $70 million of need over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's what all of this is. This is largely the same submittal that we had last year, maybe just moved around in a little different buckets. So this will go to the town council and will be submitted to the asset management committee through Phil Bergeron's office This is the time frame every year that we submit that. Our representative, Jim Grundy, who's on the committee, will work with them, the Asset Management Committee, so that they can understand the package. And if there are any other questions, they'll come back this way.
Any questions from any members?
Two comments.
Mhm.
So one is just, want to thank the superintendent and staff and our volunteers who are on our facility subcommittee. They put in a lot of work to prepare this. I know there's a lot of discussion about, especially when a bond gets through, about maintaining equipment and maintaining stuff and not letting stuff go. I want to highlight in that a couple things. One is that as we talked about earlier in the RFP for the athletic complex, there is annual maintenance and equipment to do, both recurring and, policies and procedures about daily use kind of maintenance. So a lot built into that. But we all know, the turf field will wear out. We know our gym floors wear out. We know our auditorium seats wear out. We know some of these items wear out. And I think it's important to note in this year that we are now asking the town council, in addition to some things like stabilizing our bus fleet age, by getting 1 or 2 a year, stabilizing our technology refresh. Appreciate last year the town council gave us,
500.
500 minus, so 400 and
Yeah,
something
minus
change,
76,000.
to do, our playground. So instead of putting the total burden on, other groups to fix a playground or to fix the gym floor, I think it's important that we know what we're really asking for this year with the town council is to set aside money, that's part of a down payment over 8 to 10 years and hopefully always ongoing. So 10 years from now, we're not looking to find $1 million, or we're not asking, to wait 5 more years for another bond. Or along the way, we're asking to, upgrade the auditorium for all the good things that go on there. So I'm really hoping, that the town council takes that to heart, that we need these kind of escrow funds, just like, people do in their homes. Just like businesses do. They do capital set-asides for those kinds of features. So I think that's an important point to note.
I'll just mention briefly, this having been an election year, that's the time when a whole lot of stuff gets thrown around. This is the time of year when we do send our capital improvement program to the Asset Management Commission for them to take a look at. This is the time of year that we begin our budget discussion, where we go to the town council with our request to fund our capital improvement plan and the details of what we'd like to do with that. There were, some points during the campaigning, and campaigning, and it happens because that's what campaigning's about, where some things were thrown around that these things don't happen. Well, they do. It's just they don't always happen right at the time people think they do. They happen through the year as the budget process goes on, and without a lot of fanfare. So anybody who happens to be watching this meeting or here tonight, this is when 2 of the things that were mentioned in the campaign that supposedly don't happen. And we'll continue on with this process as we go through our budget calendar, meeting with the town council, and I again, as I've done in many years, as Mr. Jones just said, stress again the need for the school department to have a dependable contribution to our capital projects. That funding that we got last year was not the the prior year or the year before that. Sometimes we had gotten it 8 years ago and then it went away, and now we got it last year. We're very thankful for that, but it has to be a dependable source. It doesn't do us enough good to have it 1 year and then have it not funded the next 2 years. It needs to be these maintenance items continue whether the items are funded or not. So it becomes extraordinarily important that we have something that we can depend on and put in our budget and carry forward, so that we don't end up behind on these maintenance issues.
And the other thing, you mentioned that, I'd like, Phil is our ex officio, and then with our asset management, one of the points in the asset management's charter right now is to think of innovative funding mechanisms other than taxes and bonding. I think this is a good year for them maybe to take up that part of their charge. I'm not saying we're gonna go out and plaster advertising on everything, but I mean, as mentioned here, we know we're probably not gonna be able to get the lighting in. But we know we're gonna need new lighting at some point. You know, whether it's grants, whether it's, you know, innovative public-private partnerships, other things. I'm hoping the asset management will also sort of, you know, be a resource to start thinking about ways we can find some other funding mechanisms for our capital needs.
I think one of the issues is you have the backlog of the years and the town does too, the whole town. The backlog of the years of not having these kind of reserves as well as trying to build a future reserve, so it's kind of a double whammy. The last point that I will make too, and there was a little bit of confusion about this last year, our capital plan is not part of our general operating budget. We couldn't possibly fit it in because we have a maximum that we can request from the town of 4% over the prior year. Capital is not in our budget. The town has a different kind of budget process than we do, but I just want to be clear, these numbers we don't have capital in our general operating budget. It's nearly impossible for us to fit anything in for that. So I just want to be clear on that.
Thank you. So we are now at the report section, the fiscal year.
Did you guys approve that?
Oh, we do, don't we? Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
D2.
D, yes, so it's D2. So motion to approve D2. I have a motion and a second. Who made, sorry, I was looking down.
Mr. Jones made a motion?
You
And
followed that,
seconded.
right, Amy?
I actually got it.
All right, great. A motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, sorry. All right, now moving on to the new business, and we didn't have any reports. Financial reports are in your packet. As I always point out, they are include the check ledgers for items in numerical and alphabetical order. A tribute to Mr. Thompson many years ago who requested that, for anyone who remembers when he did. Unless there are any questions on that, we've reached the end of our agenda. I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Remember Mr. Thompson.